The Adventure of the Naval Treaty story from Sherlock Holmes.
In the first July after my marriage, I had the opportunity to observe Sherlock Holmes and his methods of work at close quarters in 3 remarkable cases that have remained vivid in my memory. I recorded these cases under the titles The Adventure of the Second Stain, The Naval Treaty, and The Tired Captain. Although the first of these is extremely interesting, it casts suspicion upon so many leading families in the United Kingdom that its publication will not be possible for many years to come. I must add, however, that in none of the cases Holmes undertook were his analytical methods more valuable, nor did they captivate those around him to such an extent. I also possess an almost verbatim record of his explanation of the case to Monsieur de Bugue of the Paris police and the distinguished specialist Fritz von Waldbaum of Danzig, both of whom had focused on trivial aspects of the affair. Yet I must wait until the end of the present century before I can publish it. Until then, I shall content myself with publishing the second case in the list. This case, too, though highly original in its elements, was once a matter of national importance. During my school days, I had a close friend named Percy Phelps, who was of my own age but studied 2 classes above me. He was an exceptionally brilliant student and carried off all the prizes at school. In the end, he concluded his successful academic career at our school by winning a scholarship to Cambridge. As far as I recall, he had a very wide circle of acquaintances. Though we were mere boys, we were well aware that Percy's uncle was Lord Holdhurst, the great conservative statesman. However, being related to such an influential figure did not benefit Percy in the least at school. On the contrary, it worked against him. For some reason, we found it highly amusing to corner poor Percy in the schoolyard and strike his shins with cricket bats. Percy's professional career was equally successful. I had heard that, thanks to his talents and connections, he had secured a good position in the Foreign Office. But as I had no further news of him, his name had almost entirely faded from my memory until I received the letter you are about to read. Briarbray, Woking. My dear Watson, you must surely remember Tadpole Phelps, who was in the 5th form when you were in the 3rd. You may have heard that, thanks to my uncle's influence, I rose to a high position in the Foreign Office. It was during my service in this very post that I encountered the dreadful misfortune that has ruined my career. I see no need to write the details of this terrible event, but if you would not refuse my request and come to see me, I can tell you everything in person. I have only just recovered from a brain fever that lasted 9 weeks, and I am still extremely weak. Could you not bring your friend Sherlock Holmes here? The authorities say that nothing can be done, but I would like to consult him as well. Do try to bring him as soon as possible. Every minute feels like an hour to me in this dreadful uncertainty. If I did not apply to him earlier, it was not because I underestimated his abilities, but because I have only just regained my senses after what has happened. Please explain this to him. Though my mind is now clearer, I fear a relapse if I dwell upon the disaster. Physically, I am still far from well. Indeed, I am unable even to write this letter myself, and must dictate it. You must bring your friend here without fail. Your old schoolmate, Percy Phelps. My friend's urgent request that I bring Sherlock Holmes touched me deeply. I was so affected that, had it not been a difficult case, I might have attempted to solve it myself. But Sherlock loved his art and was always ready to assist those who sought his help. While I discussed the matter with my wife, she too agreed that I should lose no time in taking the case to Sherlock Holmes. Within an hour, without even having had breakfast, I was at my old quarters in Baker Street. Holmes, dressed in his dressing gown, was standing at his table, deeply engrossed in chemical experiments. Over the bluish flame of a spirit lamp, a large bulbous retort was boiling vigorously, and the distilled drops were falling into a 2-liter graduated vessel. When I entered, he cast me a quick glance, for which I understood that he was engaged in something important, so I sat down and waited. After drawing a few drops from various bottles with a glass pipette and combining them, he placed the solution on the table. In his right hand, he held a strip of litmus paper. "You have come at a critical moment, Watson," said he. "If this paper remains blue, all is well. But if it turns red, a man's life is at stake." He dipped the paper into the solution, and it instantly turned red. "HM, I thought as much," he exclaimed. "I shall attend to you in a moment, Watson. Help yourself to some tobacco from the slipper." After jotting down several telegrams and handing them to his servant, he threw himself into the armchair opposite me. Drawing his knees up and clasping his shins with his fingers, he said, "A most complicated little murder. But since you have come at this hour, I suppose you have something even better. Well then, what is it?" I handed him the letter. He read it carefully. "There is not much in the letter, is there?" he said, returning it to me. "True, very little. But the handwriting is interesting." He did not write it himself. "Of course not. It was written by a woman." "I would wager it was written by a man," said I. "No, it is the hand of a woman, and a woman of rare character. Whether she is good or bad is another matter, but it is important to know at the outset that our client is closely associated with a woman of exceptional personality. If you are ready, let us go at once to Woking and see this distressed diplomat and the lady who writes his letters." We caught the morning train from Waterloo, and within an hour we were among the fir trees and heather of Woking. Briarbrae was a detached house set in spacious grounds, only a few minutes' walk from the station. After sending in our cards, we were shown into a tastefully furnished drawing room. Shortly afterward, a stout man entered and greeted us warmly. He appeared to be about 35 or 36 years old, but with his rosy cheeks and cheerful expression, he resembled a plump and mischievous boy. "I'm very glad you have come," he said, shaking our hands warmly. "Percy has been asking for you all morning. The poor fellow clutches at every straw. His parents wish me to speak with you, as they cannot bear to discuss the matter." "We have not yet heard the details of the affair," said Holmes. "I gather you are not a member of the family." The man looked momentarily surprised, then laughed, lowering his head. "You must have seen the initials J.H. on my medallion," he said. "For a moment, I wonder how you knew. It is quite simple, really. My name is Joseph Harrison. I am the brother of Percy's fiancée, Annie. We shall soon be relatives. My sister is with Percy now. She has attended to him entirely for the past 2 months. Let's go to his room at once. He has been impatient to see you." Percy's room was on the same floor as the drawing room. It was furnished partly as a bedroom and partly as a sitting room. Flowers were arranged everywhere about it. Upon a couch beside the window, through which the fragrant breath of the garden and the delicious scented air of summer poured into the room, lay a young man. At our entrance, the woman seated at his bedside rose to her feet. "Shall I go, Percy?" she asked. The man took her hand and motioned for her to remain. With a cordial manner, he said, How do you do, Watson? Had I seen you in the street with that mustache, I should never have recognized you. And this is your famous friend Sherlock Holmes, is it not? After a few words of introduction, we seated ourselves. The stout man had withdrawn, but his sister still remained at the patient's side, her hand in Percy's. She was a striking woman. Had she been a little taller and slimmer, her figure would have been perfectly proportioned, but with her olive complexion, her large black Italian eyes, and her thick masses of raven hair, she was exceedingly handsome. Percy raised himself in bed. "To save time," said he, "I shall go directly to the point. Before this disaster darkened my future, I was a happy and successful man, on the eve of marriage, Mr. Holmes. As Watson has probably told you, I was employed at the Foreign Office and, largely through my uncle's influence, had risen rapidly to positions of some importance there. When my uncle became Foreign Secretary, the value he set upon me increased even further, for I had successfully carried out many delicate duties entrusted to me by him. His confidence in my abilities and judgment had at last become absolute. About 10 weeks ago, more exactly on the 23rd of May, he sent for me into his private room, and after speaking of the success with which I had discharged my previous duties, he told me that he was about to entrust me with a new and very important task. Drawing a bundle of gray papers from his desk, he said, "What you see here is the original of the secret treaty concluded between England and Italy. Unhappily, some rumors concerning it have already begun to circulate. It is of the utmost importance to us that no further information should leak out. The French or Russian embassies would pay enormous sums to learn the contents of this document. If it were not necessary to make a copy of it, I would never take it from my drawer. You have a desk of your own in your office, have you not?" "Yes, sir." "Then take the treaty and lock it in your desk. After everyone is gone, I will give you work to do upon it. In that way, none of the clerks will see what you are writing. When your work is finished, lock both the original and the copy in your desk again, and in the morning place them in my hands in person." I took the papers and— "One moment," said Holmes. "Were you alone in the room while this conversation took place?" "Absolutely." "Was the room large?" "There are 10 meters from one end to the other." "And were you standing in the middle of it?" "More or less." "Did you speak in a low tone?" "My uncle always speaks in a low tone." "Besides, I scarcely spoke at all." Sherlock Holmes closed his eyes. "Thank you. Pray continue." I did exactly as my uncle directed and waited until the other clerks had left. Only one man remained in the room with me, a certain Charles Gorret, who had stayed behind to finish work he had not completed. I then went out to dine. When I returned, he too had gone. I set to work at once, for I knew that Joseph, that is, the Mr. Harrison you have just seen, was in town and intended to take the 11 o'clock train to Woking. I hoped, if possible, to catch the same train. When I examined the treaty, I saw at once that it was indeed a document of the highest importance, and that my uncle had in no way exaggerated. Without going into details, I may say that it was a document defining the policy to be pursued by England in the event of the French Navy obtaining an absolute superiority over the Italian fleet in the Mediterranean. Its clauses were entirely naval, and it was signed by high dignitaries. After glancing through it, I began to make my copy. It was a long treaty. There were 26 clauses in it, and it was written in French. Though I wrote as rapidly as I could, when the clock struck 9, I had only completed 9 clauses. I had abandoned all hope of catching the train. Moreover, between the labors of the day and my dinner, I had begun to feel heavy and drowsy. I thought that a cup of coffee would revive me. At the foot of the stairs, there is a lodge occupied all night by our commissionaire. It is his habit to make coffee for the clerks who stay late. I rang the bell to summon him. A little later, while I was waiting for him to come, there stood before me an elderly woman with a roughened face. Wearing an apron, she told me that she was the commissionnaire's wife and attended to the cleaning. I asked her to make me some coffee. After copying 2 more clauses, I had grown so drowsy that I rose from my chair and walked about the room a little to stretch my legs. My coffee still had not come. I opened the door and stepped into the dim corridor to see why it was delayed. My room is at the end of the corridor, and there is no other exit from it. At the other end of the corridor is the spiral staircase, and at the foot of the staircase is the lodge where the commissionaire sits. On the landing halfway up the stairs, there is a door opening at right angles into another corridor, which leads, when one passes along it and descends the stairs, to a small side entrance. Though intended for the servants, the clerks who come from Charles Street generally use it as a shortcut. That is, roughly speaking, the arrangement of the place. "Thank you," said Holmes. "I can picture it. Now I come to the most important part." When I descended the stairs and approached the entrance, I saw that the commissionaire was asleep in his lodge. Water was boiling over upon the spirit lamp. I removed the kettle and extinguished the lamp, yet the man still did not wake. I had just stretched out my hand to shake him awake when the bell above his head rang loudly, and he started up in alarm. Looking at me with astonishment, he exclaimed, "Mr. Phelps." "I came to see whether my coffee was ready," said I. "I must have fallen asleep after putting the kettle on the lamp," he answered. Then, glancing first at me and then at the bell, which was still vibrating, he looked even more amazed and cried, "If you are here, sir, then who can have rung that bell?" "What bell?" I shouted. "What are you talking about?" "The bell from your room." At that moment my heart seemed to stop. It was as though an icy hand had gripped it. The treaty of supreme importance lay exposed upon my table, and there was evidently someone in the room. I dashed madly up the stairs and ran along the corridor. The corridor was empty. I entered the room and found it empty too. Everything remained as I had left it, but the treaty entrusted to me was gone. The copy I had made was still there, but the original had disappeared. Holmes had straightened himself in his chair and was rubbing his hands. It was plain that he had found a case after his own heart. "Pray tell us what you did next," he murmured. I realized at once that the thief must have entered by the side door, for had he come by the main entrance, we must necessarily have encountered him. "Are you certain that throughout the whole time the thief was not hidden in your room, or in the corridor which you described as dimly lit?" "That is absolutely impossible. There is not a place in my room or in the corridor where even a mouse could hide." "Thank you. Pray continue." The commissionaire, seeing the terror in my face, had followed me upstairs. Together we ran on. We crossed the other corridor, descended the stairs, and came to the door opening into Charles Street. The door was shut but not locked. We threw it open and rushed out. I know exactly what time it was when we reached the street, because I heard a clock nearby strike 3/4. It was 9:45. "That is a most important detail indeed," said Holmes, making a note upon his shirt cuff. It was a very dark night, with a warm, fine rain falling. Charles Street was deserted, but Whitehall, which runs near it, was as full of traffic as ever. We ran bareheaded with all our speed to the corner, where we found a policeman. "There's been a theft," I panted. "A document of the utmost importance has been stolen from the Foreign Office. Has anyone passed here?" "I have been standing here a quarter of an hour, sir," said he. "In all that time, only one person has passed, a tall, elderly woman with a patterned shawl over her shoulders." "That is my wife he is describing," cried the commissionaire. "Did no one else pass?" "No." Then, tugging at my arm, he cried, "The thief must have gone the other way." But I was not satisfied, and the commissionnaire's eagerness to draw me in the opposite direction only increased my suspicions. "Which way did the woman go?" I shouted. "I do not know, sir. I only saw her pass." As I observed nothing suspicious, I did not know where she went. She seemed to be in a hurry. How long ago did she pass? Not very long. How long then? About 5 minutes. The commissionaire said, "You are wasting time here. Every second is precious." My wife had nothing to do with this. "Trust me, sir. Come, let us try the other direction. If you will not come, I shall go alone." With those words, he started running the other way. I, however, sprang after him and caught him by the arm. "Where do you live?" I demanded. "At 16, Ivy Lane, Brixton," he replied, and added, "But do not ruin yourself by following a false trail, Mr. Phelps. Come, let us see whether we can learn anything if we go this way together." There was no harm in following his advice. Taking the policeman with us, we ran in the other direction. At the end of the street, we came upon a dense stream of people, but on such a rainy night, every one of them was intent only upon reaching home or some other destination as quickly as possible. There was not a single loiterer watching those who passed along the street. We then returned to the office and searched the stairs and corridors, but found nothing. The flooring in the corridor leading to my room is of a cream color, upon which dirt shows plainly. Yet though we examined it with the greatest care, we found not the slightest trace of any footprint. Had it been raining throughout the evening? Yes, it began about 7. Then how do you explain that the woman of whom you spoke could have come to your room at 9 o'clock without leaving any mark from her muddy boots? I am glad you mentioned that. It occurred to me at the time as well. Cleaning women, when they come in from outside, generally remove their boots in the commissionnaire's room and put on slippers. I see. So, despite the rainy weather, there's not a trace of mud anywhere. Is that it? A very remarkable chain of events indeed. And what happened next? We examined the room itself. We even considered the possibility of a secret door. The windows were 10 meters above the ground, and both were fastened on the inside. The carpet excludes any possibility of a trapdoor in the floor. As for the ceiling, it was merely one of those ordinary whitewashed ceilings. The person who stole the papers could only have entered by the door. Of that I am perfectly convinced. And the fireplace? There is no fireplace. There is a stove. The bell rope hangs immediately to the right of my desk. Whoever rang the bell must therefore have come right up to my table. But why should the thief ring the bell? That is another mystery. A most extraordinary case indeed. And what did you do next? I presume you examined the room to see whether the thief had left any trace behind him. A cigar end, a dropped glove, a hairpin, or any such trifling object? No, there was nothing of the sort. No smell either. I never thought of that. In an inquiry of this kind, the smell of tobacco or the like may be of the utmost service. I never used tobacco myself, so I'm sure that if there had been any smell of it, I should have noticed it at once. There was no clue of any kind. The only tangible fact was that the commissionnaire's wife, Mrs. Tangi, had left in great haste. Her husband's only explanation was that she always went home about that hour. The police and I concluded that, if the papers were indeed in the woman's possession, the best thing to be done was to seize her as quickly as possible. If we arrived in time, the document might still be recovered. By the time we reached Scotland Yard, they too had already been aroused. Detective Forbes came with the utmost energy and took charge of the matter. We hired a cab, and within half an hour had reached the address that had been given us. The door was opened by a young lady whom we learned to be the eldest daughter of Mrs. Tangi. She told us that her mother had not yet returned and showed us into the sitting room. 10 minutes later, there came a knock at the door. At that moment, by a mistake for which I still reproach myself, we allowed the girl to answer it instead of doing so ourselves. We heard her say to her mother, "Mother, there are 2 men in the parlor who wish to speak to you." Immediately afterwards, there was a sound of hurried movement in the passage. Forbes instantly flung open the door, and we rushed into the back room, which served as the kitchen, but the woman had reached it before us. She looked at us with insolent eyes. Then, recognizing me, an expression of astonishment came over her face. "Why, you're Mr. Phelps from the office," she cried. "Come, come," said Forbes. "Did you really think that you could escape us?" "I took you for moneylenders," said she. "We've had some trouble with them lately." "That will not do," said Forbes. "We have every reason to believe that you took important papers from the Foreign Office and ran here to destroy them. You must come with us to Scotland Yard. You will be searched." For all her protests and resistance, it was useless. We immediately summoned a cab, and the three of us drove off together. Before doing so, however, we had carefully examined the kitchen, especially the stove, for she might have done something with the papers before we entered. Not only did we fail to find the documents, but there was no trace of ashes or anything of the kind. On reaching Scotland Yard, we at once handed the woman over to the female searcher. The waiting while she performed her duty was torture to me. At last the official returned and told us that absolutely nothing had been found upon the woman. It was then that I first began fully to realize and feel the horror of the matter. Until that moment, I had been in constant motion and had had no leisure to reflect. I had been so certain that the papers would be recovered that I had never even considered what would happen to me if the treaty were lost. But now there was nothing more to be done, and my last hope had vanished. I began to comprehend the terrible situation in which I stood. Watson can tell you what a nervous and sensitive boy I was in our school days. I began to think of the disgrace that would fall upon my uncle in the cabinet. I should bring shame not only upon him, but upon everyone in any way connected with me. That I had been the victim of an extraordinary accident altered nothing. In diplomatic affairs, there is no room for accidents. I was ruined. I could have sunk into the earth for very shame. I hardly knew what I was doing. I dimly remember that the officials gathered round me. No doubt, because what was passing in my mind was written plainly enough upon my face. They tried to comfort me. One of them accompanied me in a cab as far as Waterloo and remained with me until the Woking train departed. Had we not chanced to meet my neighbor, Dr. Ferrier, he would probably have taken me all the way home. The doctor cared for me with the greatest kindness and did all that he could to help me recover from the collapse which seized me at the station. By the time I reached home, I was beside myself with nerves. You may imagine the shock to the household when Dr. Ferrier's ringing of the bell brought them from their beds. Poor Annie and my mother were in great distress. Dr. Ferrier had learned the broad outlines of what had occurred from the detective at the station, and he explained the matter to my family. My condition, however, continued to worsen, as it was plain that I had fallen into a serious illness that would be long in duration. They prepared for me the pretty bedroom which had been set aside for Joseph. For 9 weeks, I lay there unconscious with brain fever, Mr. Holmes. Had it not been for Mrs. Harrison's devoted attention and that of the doctor, I should not now be speaking to you. Mrs. Harrison tended me by day like a child, and by night engaged a nurse to sit beside me. It was well she did so, for no one could say what I might do when the crisis came upon me. Little by little my mind returned, but my memory did not come back fully until 3 days ago. There are times when I wish it had never returned at all. My very first act was to send a telegram to Mr. Forbes, who is charge of the case. He came to see me and told me that everything possible had been done, but that they had no clue whatever in their hands. The commissionaire and his wife had been investigated and reinvestigated without result. Afterwards, the police directed their suspicions upon the young man Gorret, who had been working late in the office that evening. The fact that he had remained late and that his surname was French had been enough to make them suspect him, but he had left the office long before I began copying the treaty. Though he bore a French name, Goret came of Huguenot stock and was as loyal to English traditions and ideas as you or I. Nothing of any kind could be found against him either, and so the affair remained unsolved. You're my last hope, Mr. Holmes. If you too fail me, I shall lose both my position and my honor forever. This long narrative had thoroughly exhausted the sick man. He laid his head back once more upon the pillow and tried to rest. Meanwhile, his nurse gave him some kind of stimulant in a glass. Holmes sat with his head thrown back and his eyes closed, saying nothing at all. To one who did not know him, such a manner might have seemed discourteous or indifferent, but I understood well that he had withdrawn into himself in order to analyze the case more thoroughly. At last he said, "You have told your story with the utmost clearness. You have left me very little opportunity for questions. There is, however, one thing which I should like to ask. Did you mention to anyone that a special task had been entrusted to you?" "To no one, not even to Mrs. Harrison, for example." "No. After receiving the instructions, I did not come to Woking again until I had actually begun the work. And no relation or friend happened to visit you that day by chance?" "No." "Do any of your relations know where your office is situated?" "Yes, they have all been to my office." "Of course, if you never mention the treaty to anyone, those questions lose much of their meaning." "I told no one anything whatever." "Do you know anything about the commissionaire?" "Nothing, beyond the fact that he is an old soldier." "Do you know in what regiment he served?" "I believe I once heard it." "Ah, yes, the Coldstream Guards." "Thank you. I am sure that I shall learn the details from Forbes." The authorities are often admirable at collecting information, even when they do not know how to use it. What a beautiful rose! He had crossed to the window beside the chair and, opening it, lifted the drooping stem of a moss rose, gazing upon that marvelous blending of green and red. It was to me a new aspect of my friend's character, for I had never before observed in him any interest in nature. Turning his back upon the window, he said, "Religion is the place where reason is most necessary. A logician might construct theology as an exact science. There is nothing which demonstrates the providence of God so clearly and so plainly as flowers. Everything else which we possess, our powers, our desires, our food, is necessary for our existence in the first instance. But this rose is an extra thing. Its color and its perfume are embellishments of life, not conditions of it. Now, only goodwill can bestow what is extra, and so flowers are the proof of it." Percy Phelps and his nurse listened to Holmes's reflections with expressions of astonishment and disappointment. Holmes had sunk once more in a deep thought, gazing at the rose between his fingers. It was not until some minutes later, when the young lady spoke, that he returned once more to us. "Have you any hope of solving this mystery?" she asked, with a shade of severity in her tone. "Ah, did you say mystery?" He started suddenly, as though recalled to the realities of life. "One must admit that the case is extremely intricate and difficult of solution," said he. "But I promise you that I shall devote myself to the matter, and that if anything presents itself to me, I shall let you know. Have you seen any clue? You have furnished me with 7 clues, but before I can say how far they are important, I must test them one by one. Do you suspect anyone?" "I suspect myself." "What?" "Of coming too quickly to a conclusion." "Then go back to London and test your conclusions." Rising from his chair, Holmes said, "An excellent piece of advice, Mrs. Harrison. I think that is indeed the best course. Watson, you also, Mr. Phelps, must not indulge in hopes without reason. We are confronted by a very complex case." "I shall know no peace until I see you again," said the diplomatist. "Though I cannot say that I am very hopeful of bringing you good news. We shall visit you again tomorrow morning by the same train." "God bless you," said Phelps. It is enough that you promise to come. To know that something is being done gives me strength. By the way, I have had a letter from Lord Holdhurst. Indeed. And what does he say? Though his tone is cold, it is not unkind. I imagine that, because I have been so seriously ill, he is reluctant to press me too hard. He emphasizes once more the gravity of the matter, and writes that no decision concerning my future, by which he means my dismissal, will be taken until I have recovered my health and have been given a chance to make amends for my misfortune. He has acted sensibly and considerately, said Holmes. Come, Watson, let us go. There is much to do in London. Mr. Joseph Harrison drove us to the station in his dog cart. A little later, we were in the Portsmouth train as it wound its way onward. Holmes had sunk into deep thought, and until we reached Clapham Junction, he scarcely uttered a word. At last he said, "It is a fine thing to travel upon these lines which command a view over London. One can look down upon the houses." I had thought he was jesting, for the prospect was a singularly dreary one, but he presently explained himself. Just look at those great masses of buildings rising above the roofs. They are like lonely islands of brick color on a leaden sea. Boarding schools, lighthouses, my boy, beacons of the future, each of them an envelope containing hundreds of bright seeds. When spring comes, each of them will burst into growth and help to build a brighter and fairer England. This Phelps does not drink, I suppose. I should not think so, nor do I. Still, every possibility must be considered. The poor fellow has fallen into a very deep pit. Whether we can pull him out of it, I cannot yet say. What is your opinion of Mrs. Harrison? She has a strong character. Yes, and I think a good one. She and her brother are the only children of an ironmaster in Northumberland. Last winter, during a journey, Phelps became engaged to the girl. Afterwards she came, accompanied by her brother, to make the acquaintance of Phelps's family. It was at that very time that this catastrophe befell him, and the girl remained behind in order to nurse her future husband. Her brother Joseph, being perfectly comfortable where he was, likewise stayed on. You see that I have already made one or two independent inquiries, but our real investigations will begin today. I have begun my practice, but got no further. Holmes interrupted me with a touch of asperity. If your professional duties interest you more than my cases, I was about to say, I answered that my practice is not particularly busy at present, since this is the quietest season of the year. It would occasion no inconvenience if I were absent from it for a day or two. His spirits at once revived. Excellent, said he. Then let us work this case out together. We must begin by speaking with Forbes. He can tell us every detail of what has been done. We may then decide from what angle we are to approach the affair. Did you not say that you already had clues in hand? Yes, we have a number of clues, but further inquiries are needed. The hardest crimes to unravel are those which are committed without motive, but this is not one of them. Who profited by the theft of the treaty? The French embassy, the Russian embassy, those who might sell it to one or the other of these, and Lord Holdhurst. We must keep all these in view. Lord Holdhurst. Certainly. Statesmen may sometimes find themselves in a position in which they would not be particularly grieved by the accidental destruction of so important a document. Even a statesman like Lord Holdhurst, who has served for years with honor, it is a possibility which we cannot afford to overlook. We shall speak with Lord Holdhurst today and hear what he has to tell us. As a matter of fact, I have already begun to investigate one or two points. Indeed, yes. From the post office at Woking Station, I sent a telegram to all the evening papers in London. This advertisement will appear in each of them. He handed me a page torn from his notebook. Written upon it in pencil were these words: reward of £10. The person who can state the number of the cab which set down a fare at or near the Foreign Office in Charles Street on the 23rd of May will be rewarded. Apply 221B, Baker Street. Are you sure that the thief came in a cab? Even if he did not, we lose nothing by inserting the advertisement. But if, as Mr. Phelps says, there was no place in the corridor or in the office where anyone could conceal himself, then the thief must have come from outside, on so rainy a night. If a person coming in from the street leaves no trace upon a light-colored floor examined only a few minutes later, then it is highly probable that he came in a cab. I may almost say that I am convinced of it. It is a reasonable supposition. That was one of the clues of which I spoke to you. Perhaps something may come of it. Another clue is the bell, which is the most interesting point in the case. How came the bell to ring? Did the thief ring it as an act of defiance? Or was it rung by someone who was with the thief and wished to prevent the crime? Or was it an accident? Or he sank once more into one of those deep fits of reflection with which I was so familiar. Knowing his ways as well as I did, I recognized in that mood the sign that some new possibility had occurred to him. It was 20 minutes past 3 when we reached the station at which we were to alight. After a hasty luncheon there, we made our way at once to Scotland Yard. Holmes had already telegraphed to Forbes. We found that sharp-eyed, crafty-looking little man, by no means cordial in manner, awaiting us. His reception of us was icy enough, and when we stated our object, his face altered even more unfavorably. "I know your methods, Mr. Holmes," said he, with some bitterness. "You make use of every scrap of information which the police place before you. Solve the case upon that basis. And when it is over, you glorify yourself and disparage the police." "On the contrary," said Holmes, "in only 4 of my last 53 cases did my name appear at all. In the remaining 49, all credit was attributed to the police. But perhaps, being young and inexperienced, you are not yet aware of these things. In time you will understand that we labor toward the same end." The detective softened somewhat. "I should not object to a clue or two," said he. "I have made no progress so far." "What have you done, then?" "We kept watch upon the commissionaire, Tangi. He left his regiment with a good record. We found nothing against him. But the case is different with his wife. I think that woman knows more than she appears to." "Did you keep watch upon her as well?" "Yes, we placed a woman upon her track. Mrs. Tangi drinks. Twice our agent tried to draw her out while she was the worse for drink, but learned nothing. As I understand it, they had fallen into the hands of money lenders." "Yes, but the debt has been paid." "And where did they get the money?" "There is nothing suspicious there. They paid it when the man received his pension. When Mr. Phelps asked for coffee, why was it she who went instead of her husband?" "She said that her husband was very tired and that she wished to help him." "That sounds plausible enough, seeing that the man was found asleep in his chair a short while later. Apart from the woman's fondness for drink, there seems nothing against them." "Did you ask why she was in such haste that night?" "Her hurried manner struck the policeman also. She says that, as she had left later than usual that day, she wished to get home as quickly as possible." "And did you point out that, although you and Mr. Phelps started at least 20 minutes after her, you reached the house before she did?" "She explains that by the fact that we drove in a private cab, while she came by public conveyance." "And did she explain why, the instant she entered the house, she ran straight to the kitchen?" "She says that she kept there the money she had laid aside to pay the money lenders. At least she has a reasonable answer to every question." "Did you ask her whether she had seen anyone loitering about the street after leaving the government office?" "She says she saw no one except the policeman." "You certainly seem to have cross-examined the woman admirably. What else have you done?" "We have also had that clerk, Gorrit, watch for the past 9 weeks, but nothing has come of that either. He appears to be clean. Anything else?" "There is no other clue at our disposal. no evidence of any kind. Have you any theory as to how the bell came to ring? I have never been able to make sense of that. Anyone who could ring the bell under such circumstances must have been extraordinarily cool. Yes, it is indeed a strange point. Thank you very much for the information you have given me. If I should obtain anything that might help you to arrest the culprit, I shall certainly let you know. Come, Watson? As we left the building, I asked, and where are we going now? We are now going to speak with the present Foreign Secretary and future Prime Minister, Lord Holdhurst. Fortunately, when we arrived at his office in Downing Street, the minister had not yet gone. A short while after Holmes had sent in his card, we were shown in. The statesman received us with his habitual courtesy and indicated the two armchairs standing opposite each other beside the fireplace. As he stood upon the rug between us, the tall, slender man, with his sharp features, thoughtful face, and wavy hair grizzled here and there, bore himself in such a fashion as to proclaim him not an ordinary person, but a true nobleman. Your name is not unfamiliar to me, Mr. Holmes, said he, with a smile. Nor shall I pretend to be ignorant of the reason for your visit. There has been only one occurrence in this building which could interest you. Is it indiscreet of me to ask in whose interest you are acting? In that of Mr. Percy Phelps, said Holmes. Then in that of my unfortunate nephew. You will understand that the relationship between us makes it the more difficult for me to extend him any overt protection. I fear this affair will have a very serious effect upon his career. And if the papers were recovered, then the matter would, of course, be altered. I should like to ask you one or two questions, Lord Holdhurst. I shall be happy to give you whatever information I can. Was it in this room that you gave him instructions to copy the treaty? Yes. There was no possibility, I suppose, of anyone overhearing you? Such a thing would have been impossible. Had you mentioned your intention of having the treaty copied to anyone? No. Are you certain of that? Absolutely. If you mentioned nothing to anyone, and Mr. Phelps likewise said nothing, then it is possible that the thief's entrance into the room that night was accidental. He may have seen the papers lying upon the table and decided to steal them. The minister smiled. I cannot say anything upon that point, said he. Holmes reflected for a moment. There is another point upon which I should like to consult you, said he. You are, I presume, apprehensive of the grave consequences which might ensue were this treaty to be made public. A shadow seemed to pass at once over the minister's face. Of the gravest possible consequences. And have any of those grave consequences yet come to pass? Not as yet. If the treaty had fallen into the hands of the French or Russian authorities, you would certainly have heard of it, would you not? Lord Holdhurst frowned. I should. Then, seeing that nearly 10 weeks have passed and no word of such a thing has reached you, I presume we may reasonably conclude that, for some reason or other, the treaty has not found its way into those quarters. Lord Holdhurst shrugged his shoulders. We need hardly suppose that the thief stole the treaty in order to have it framed and hung upon his wall, Mr. Holmes. Perhaps he is waiting in order to sell it at a better price. If he waits much longer, he will get nothing for it, for within a month or two the treaty will cease to be secret. That point is of real importance, said Holmes. It is also possible that the thief may have fallen suddenly ill. The minister suddenly fixed his eyes upon Holmes. With an attack of brain fever, perhaps, said he. I said nothing of the sort, returned Holmes in his careless manner. We have occupied too much of your valuable time. With your permission, we shall now take our leave. Whoever the thief may be, said the minister, bowing and indicating the door, I wish you every success in your inquiry. When we reached Whitehall, Holmes said, a refined man, but one who is struggling to maintain his position. He is certainly not rich and has many needs. You must have noticed that his boot soles had been renewed. I shall not keep you from your own affairs any longer, Watson. Unless there is some reply to my advertisement in the papers, I have nothing more to do today. But I should be much obliged if you would come by the same train to Woking with me tomorrow morning. Next morning, as we had arranged, we set off together for Woking. No reply had been received to the advertisement he had inserted in the papers, nor had there arisen any fresh development that might throw light upon the case. There was once again upon his face that impassive red Indian expression which he could assume at will. It was impossible, by looking at him, to tell whether or not he was satisfied with the course of the inquiry. He preferred to speak, not of the case, but of Bertillon's system of identifying criminals by their outward appearance. He made no effort to conceal his admiration for the French savant. When we arrived, we found our client with his faithful nurse beside him. He had recovered considerably since our former visit. When we entered, he rose from the couch to greet us without the least difficulty. "Have you any news?" he asked eagerly. "No good news, as I expected," said Holmes. "I have spoken with Forbes and with your uncle. I have also made one or two other attempts. I am awaiting the result of them. Something may yet come of it. You have not abandoned hope, then?" "Never. God bless you, Mr. Holmes," cried Mrs. Harrison. "If only we can keep up our courage and our patience, the truth will surely come to light." Phelps seated himself once more upon the couch. "I have more to tell you than you have to tell me," said he. "I had hoped that you might have something to tell. I had an adventure last night, and a very serious one." As he spoke, his expression grew grave. There was fear in his eyes. "I'm beginning to believe that this vile conspiracy aimed not only at my honor, but at my life also." "Indeed," said Holmes. "I know it seems difficult to believe, for, so far as I know, I have no enemies. Yet I cannot interpret what happened to me last night in any other way. Pray tell us." "In the first place, I should mention that last night was the first on which I slept without a nurse at my bedside. As I had grown much stronger, I believed that I could safely be left alone. Still, I had left the night lamp burning. At 2 in the morning, I awoke from a light sleep upon hearing a faint sound. It was like the gnawing of wood by a mouse. Thinking it might be a mouse, I lay still and listened for a time. The sound grew louder and more distinct. At length, there came from the window a sharp metallic noise. I sat up in astonishment. It was then clear whence the sound proceeded. The first noise had come from some instrument inserted between the window sashes. The second was the sound of the fastening being forced. For 10 minutes, nothing further occurred. Evidently, the person outside wished to know whether I had been awakened by the noise. Then I heard the faint creak of the window as it was slowly opened. My nerves were already in too shattered a condition for me to bear it any longer. I sprang from my bed and flung open the shutters. A man was crouching at the foot of the window. I saw him only imperfectly. For the instant the window opened, he sprang away like lightning. Some cloak or mantle which he had drawn over his head concealed the greater part of his face. Of one thing, however, I am perfectly certain. He was armed. The object in his hand looked to me like a long knife. I saw it glimmer distinctly as he turned his back. "Most interesting," said Holmes. "And what did you do then?" "Had my strength been greater, I should have leapt from the window and pursued him. But I was in no condition for such an effort, so I rang the bell to rouse the household. This caused some delay, however, because the bell rings in the kitchen while the servants sleep upstairs. But I did not content myself with ringing. I also cried out. Joseph thereupon came down and roused the others. Joseph, together with the groom, found some traces among the flower beds, but there had been no rain of late, and so it was impossible to follow a track across the grass. There was, however, one mark upon the fence by the roadside. A place on the upper rail had been broken, as though someone had snapped it in crossing. I have not yet informed the police of the matter, because I wished first to have your opinion. Our client's account had made an extraordinary impression upon Holmes. He sprang to his feet and began pacing up and down the room. He was visibly struggling to restrain his excitement. "Misfortunes do indeed come in battalions," said Phelps, smiling, though it was clear that the adventure had profoundly shaken him. "You are certainly richly endowed with misfortune," said Holmes. "Are you well enough to walk a little about the grounds with me?" "Yes, I think so. It will do me no harm to get into the sunshine. Joseph shall come with us." "I will come too," said Mrs. Harrison. Holmes shook his head. "I fear not," said he. "I must ask you to remain where you are." The young lady resumed her seat with an expression of displeasure, though her brother came with us. The four of us went out together, making our way around the house. We came at last beneath the diplomatist's window. As he had said, there were some traces in the flower bed beneath it, but they were confused and indefinite. Holmes stooped and examined them for a little, then straightened himself with a shrug of the shoulders. "I do not think there is anything to be done here," said he. "Let us walk around the house and see why the thief should have selected your room. To my mind, the large windows of the drawing room and dining room would have offered a much easier entrance." Mr. Joseph Harrison said, "That side faces the road, so anyone there would be more easily seen." Quite true. He might also have tried that door over there. What is it used for?" "For tradesmen's deliveries, but it is locked at night." "Have you ever had anything of this kind happen before?" "No," said our client. "Have you any silver plate in the house, or anything else that might tempt a burglar?" "There is nothing of value." Holmes wandered about the house with his hands in his pockets and an air of complete indifference. I was by no means accustomed to seeing him in such a mood. "By the way," said he, turning to Joseph Harrison, "I believe you found the place where the fellow climbed over the fence. Let's have a look at that too." The stout man led the way, and we followed to the place where the wooden fence had been broken. Holmes took the little loose splinter in his hand and examined it closely. "You think this happened last night? To me it looks older. Do you not think so yourself?" "I dare say it does. There is no sign that anyone crossed here." "No, nothing will come of this. Let us go back to the room and talk there." Percy Phelps was moving slowly, leaning upon the arm of his future brother-in-law. Holmes, however, strode rapidly across the lawn, so that the two of us reached the bedroom window well before the others. In a singularly sharp tone, he said, "Mrs. Harrison, you must remain where you are all day. On no account are you to leave your place. This is really most important." The girl looked astonished. "Certainly," said she, "if you wish it. And when you go to bed, lock the door of the room and take the key away with you. Promise me that you will do so." "But what of Percy?" "He's coming up to London with us." "Am I to stay here, then?" "Yes, for his own good. There is no time to lose. Promise me that you will do this." As the other two came up behind us, Mrs. Harrison nodded her assent. Her brother said, "Hello, Annie. Why should you shut yourself up indoors on such a fine day? You ought to come out into the sunshine." "No, thank you, Joseph. I have a slight headache. The cool air of this room suits me better." "And now what do you advise?" asked our client. "We must not turn our backs upon the larger matter in order to investigate this little incident. It would be of great assistance to us if you were to come to London with us. At once, as soon as may be convenient for you. Within an hour, say. I feel quite strong enough. I shall be glad to help you. You will be of very great assistance. You may even wish me to remain the night with you." That was exactly what I was about to suggest. "Then if my visitor of last night returns, he will find the cage empty. Whatever you wish shall be done to the letter, Mr. Holmes. I suppose you will want Joseph to accompany us and look after me." No. My friend Watson is a doctor. He will see to you, if you will allow it. Let us lunch here, and afterwards the three of us will go together." We did as Holmes proposed, though Mrs. Harrison, in obedience to his request, excused herself and never left the room. My friend's purpose in doing this may have been simply to keep the woman away from Phelps, but if he had any other object in view, I was unable to perceive it. Phelps sat down to luncheon in high spirits, cheered by the recovery of his strength and the prospect of taking action. Holmes, however, had a surprise in store for us. After accompanying us as far as the station and seeing us into the train, he calmly informed us that he had no intention whatever of leaving Woking. "There are one or two points here which I wish to clear up before I go," said he. "It will be as well for you not to be here, Mr. Phelps. Watson, when you reach London, I shall be much obliged if you will take our guest straight to Baker Street and not leave your friend until you see me again. It is a good thing that you're old schoolfellows. You will have much to talk about. Mr. Phelps can sleep in the spare room tonight. I shall take the train, which reaches Waterloo at 8 in the morning, and be in time for breakfast." "But what of your inquiries in London?" asked Phelps in a tone of discouragement. "They can wait until tomorrow. There is more important work for me to do here at present." As the train began to move, Phelps cried, "You had better tell them at Briarbrae that I shall not return until tomorrow evening." "I do not think that I shall go back to Briarbrae at all," answered Sherlock Holmes, waving his hand to us with a smile as we moved away. Though we discussed Holmes's conduct between ourselves, we were quite unable to understand the reason for it. "I think he means to discover some clue in connection with last night's attempt," said Phelps. "If indeed we can call it a burglary. For my own part, I do not think it was an ordinary burglary at all." "What then was it?" "My dear fellow, you may put it down to the condition of my nerves, but I am convinced that some deep political intrigue is at work around me. I believe that these plotters have some reason for wishing me dead. It may sound wild and absurd to you, but why else should a burglar enter a room in which there is nothing of value? And armed with a knife, too. Are you certain that the thing in his hand was not a jemmy?" "No, it was a knife. I saw it glimmer distinctly. But why should they bear you any malice?" "That is exactly what I wish to know. If Holmes is of the same opinion as yourself, then that would explain why he did not come with us. If we suppose your theory to be correct, then if Holmes captures the man who attempted to murder you last night, he will be very near to finding the person who stole the Naval Treaty. It would be absurd to imagine that there were two separate men, one who took the treaty from your desk and another who tried to kill you. But Holmes said that he did not mean to go back to Briarbrae." "I have known him a long while," said I. "If he does a thing, he has always some good reason for doing it." After that, the conversation drifted to other matters. It was, however, to be a trying day for me. Phelps was still weak after his long illness. The misfortunes through which he had passed had made him nervous and irritable. Though I endeavored to distract his mind by talking of Afghanistan, of India, and of social questions, it was all in vain. Again and again he returned to the lost treaty, to the question of what Holmes might be doing, of what course Lord Holdhurst might adopt, and of what news the morning might bring. By evening his excited manner had become more difficult than ever to endure. "Have you full confidence in Holmes?" he asked. "I have seen him achieve great successes, but none, I suppose, in matters so dark as this." "No, that is not so. I can remember cases which he has solved where there was far less to go upon. But I suppose there were never interests so great as in this case. I cannot say exactly, but I know that he has been occupied with matters of the utmost importance for 3 separate reigning houses in Europe. You know Holmes well, Watson. He is a mysterious man, and I can never tell what he is thinking. Do you imagine that he has hope? Does he believe that he can solve the matter? He has said nothing. That is a bad sign. No, quite the reverse. When things go badly, he generally says so. When he is on a trail, and especially when he believes that he is on the right one, he is extremely close. My dear fellow, there is no use in worrying any more over the matter now. I beg of you to go to sleep. Whatever the morning may bring, it will be best to meet it fresh. At last I succeeded, not without difficulty, in persuading him to retire. To judge by his excited condition, however, I had little hope that he would sleep. My friend's mood must have been infectious, for I too tossed from side to side the whole night long. I kept turning over this singular affair in my mind and constructing 100 theories, each more absurd than the last. Why had Holmes remained at Woking? Why had he insisted that Mrs. Harrison should remain all day in the sick room? Why had he taken such particular pains that the people at Briarbrae should not know that he meant to stay at Woking? I was trying to find some explanation that would include all these things when I fell asleep. When I awoke, it was 7 o'clock. I went at once to Phelps's room. To judge from his weary and pallid appearance, he had not slept at all. The first question he asked was whether Holmes had returned. "He will be here at the time he promised," said I. "Not a minute before, and not a minute after." In this I was not proved a false prophet. It was a little after 8 when a cab drew up rapidly at the door and my friend alighted from it. Looking from the window, we saw that his left hand was bandaged. His face, too, was pale and gloomy. He came in, but it was some little time before he reached us upstairs. "He looks like a beaten man," cried Phelps. I was forced to admit that he was right. "And yet the clue that is to solve the case is in all probability in this very city," said I. Phelps muttered something indistinctly. "I do not know why, but I had built great hopes upon him," said Phelps. "Yet yesterday his hand was not in that state. What can have happened?" When Holmes entered, I said, "You are not hurt, I hope?" "No, no," he answered. "A mere trifle of clumsiness, that is all." After greeting us, he said, "Your case, Mr. Phelps, is the darkest with which I have ever had to deal. I was afraid from the first that it might prove too much for you. It has certainly been a most remarkable experience for me. Judging by your bandaged hand, you have had some adventure," said I. "Will you not tell us what has occurred?" "After breakfast, my dear fellow, permit me to remind you that this morning I have inhaled the air of Surrey for 50 kilometers. I suppose there has been no answer to the cab advertisement." "None." "Well, one cannot score with every stroke." The table was laid, and I was about to ring the bell when Mrs. Hudson entered with the tea and coffee. A few minutes later, she brought in a 3-cover dish. We all 3 sat down to the meal. Holmes with an excellent appetite, I with considerable curiosity, and Phelps in deep dejection. Holmes lifted the cover from the curried chicken. "One must do Mrs. Hudson justice," said he. "Though she may not be very varied in her meals, being a Scotswoman, she thoroughly understands breakfast. What have you there upon your plate, Watson?" "Ham and eggs," said I. "Excellent. And what will you take, Mr. Phelps? Curried chicken, or eggs, or something else?" "Thank you. I have no appetite," said Phelps. Come, you must take something. Have a little of what is before you." "Thank you, but I could not eat a mouthful." "Very good, then," said Holmes, giving me a roguish wink. "In that case, I suppose you will at least help me." The instant Phelps raised the cover, he gave a cry. He sat fixed in his chair, rigid and speechless. His face turned utterly white, as though the color of the thing upon which he gazed had been reflected upon it. In the middle of the dish lay the blue-gray roll of paper. He snatched it up and stared at it with eyes starting from his head. Then, clasping it to his breast, he sprang to his feet and danced madly about the room with cries of joy. Presently, the emotions through which he had passed so overcame him that he sank exhausted into an armchair. We prevented him from fainting only by pouring brandy down his throat. Holmes laid his hand upon Phelps's shoulder and sought to calm him. There. It was perhaps hardly wise to produce the treaty so suddenly. Watson can tell you that I have never been able to endure emotional scenes. Phelps seized Sherlock Holmes's hand and kissed it. God bless you, he cried. You have saved my honor. My own honor was at stake also, said Holmes. If it is humiliating for you to fail in a trust committed to you, it is equally humiliating for me to fail in a case. Phelps placed the precious papers in the inner pocket of his coat. I would not willingly keep you from your breakfast any longer, said he, but I am consumed with eagerness to know how and where you recovered the treaty. Sherlock Holmes drained a cup of coffee and then turned his attention to the ham and eggs. After that, he rose from the table, lit his pipe, and seated himself in the armchair. I shall first tell you what I did, and afterwards how I did it, said he. After leaving you at the station, I took a pleasant walk, admiring the delightful Surrey scenery, until I reached a pretty little village called Ripley. There I had my tea at an inn, and, by way of prudent precaution, I filled my flask and did not neglect to put into my pocket the sandwich I had wrapped in paper. I remained there until evening, and then set out again, reaching the road beside Briarbrae shortly after sunset. I waited until the road was entirely deserted. Indeed, as far as I could see, it was by no means a busy one, and then climbed over the fence and entered the grounds. The gate must have been open, cried Phelps. Yes, but in matters of this sort, I have my own preferences. I had fixed my eye upon the place where the 3 fir trees stood. Behind them, I could not possibly be seen by anyone in the house. Crawling and creeping and taking advantage of every bush for cover. You have only to look at the knees of my trousers. I at last reached the clump of rhododendrons opposite your bedroom window. There I crouched down and waited to see what might occur. The blind in your room was not drawn, and I could see Mrs. Harrison seated at the table reading a book. At 10:15, she closed the book, fastened the shutters, and left the room. I heard her close the door, and I knew that she had locked it. Locked it, cried Phelps. Yes, I had instructed Mrs. Harrison to lock the door when she left the room and to take the key away with her. She carried out my directions to the letter, and had it not been for her cooperation, the papers would not at this moment be in the pocket of your coat. After Mrs. Harrison left the room, the lights were extinguished. I remained crouching among the rhododendrons, waiting. The night was fine, but even so it was a trying vigil. I felt the very same excitement as the hunter who lies in wait by the riverbank for his great game. It was a very long watch, Watson. Almost as long as that which we kept together in the death chamber in the case of the speckled band. The church clock at Woking struck every quarter hour, and more than once I found myself wondering whether the clock had stopped. At last, at 2 a.m, I heard the bolt of one of the doors push back slowly, and then there came the creak of a lock. A moment later, the side door used by the servants was opened. By the moonlight, I could see who it was that emerged. It was Mr. Joseph Harrison. Joseph, cried Phelps. He had no hat upon his head, but had thrown a black coat over his shoulders so that in an emergency he could at once conceal his face. He stole along upon tiptoe, close to the wall. When he reached the window, he drew out a long-bladed knife and inserted it between the sashes, forcing back the catch. He opened the window. Then he slipped the knife between the shutters and raised the bar that fastened them, thus removing the final obstacle. From where I lay, I had a full view of the interior of the room. I could follow every one of Joseph's movements. He lit 2 candles which stood upon the mantelpiece, and then lifted the corner of the carpet near the door. Immediately, he took up a square piece of board from the floor. Indeed, plumbers are accustomed to leave such trapdoors in the boards wherever gas pipes run beneath, so that they may reach them in case of repair. The cover which Joseph raised must have been over the place where the T-joint to the kitchen lay. From a hiding place, he took the little roll of paper, replaced the board, smoothed the carpet, extinguished the candles, and came straight into my arms. I was waiting for him outside the window. I must confess that I found Joseph Harrison a far more dangerous and aggressive fellow than I had expected. He sprang at me with a knife in his hand. It was only after I had twice flung him to the ground and had received a slight cut upon my fingers that I was able to master him. When the struggle was over, one of his eyes was so swollen as to be useless, and he presented a very sorry appearance. At last, making a sensible decision, he gave up the papers. Once I had them, I allowed the man to go. I did not, however, neglect to send Forbes a telegram this morning containing every detail. If he can lay hands upon the bird, so much the better. But if the bird flies, it is of no great consequence. Indeed, it may be the better course for the government. I imagine that Lord Holdhurst and Mr. Percy Phelps would both prefer that these events should not come before court. Our client could scarcely speak. "Good God," said he. Then, while I was going out of my mind for 10 weeks over the loss of the papers were actually in my own room. Precisely so. Joseph. Then the scoundrel was a thief. I fear that Joseph was not the man he appeared to be. He had his darker side. I have learned this morning that he had lost a great deal of money upon the stock exchange and was quite capable of anything that might repair his losses. He was so selfish a man that, when the chance presented itself, he cared nothing for his sister's domestic happiness or for the ruin of your honor. Percy Phelps sank back in his chair once more. "My head swims," said he. "Your words have completely dazed me." Holmes, in that familiar didactic manner of his, said, "The great difficulty in your case was that there was too much evidence. The vital facts were buried beneath a mass of irrelevant ones. Our task was first to choose from the information before us that which was important, and then to examine it closely until we could determine how the chain of events had actually occurred. From a moment you told us that Joseph had intended to return with you to Woking that night, I began to suspect him. Since Woking lay on the road from the Foreign Office, it would be nothing extraordinary if he had called upon you as he passed. When you told us that someone had attempted to enter your bedroom, that became a turning point. Since Joseph's room had been hurriedly emptied and turned into a sick room for you on the night when you were brought home with a doctor, if there was something hidden in your room, then it could be no one but Joseph who had hidden it there. The fact that the attempt at robbery occurred on the very first night you lay there alone showed that the intruder was intimately acquainted with the arrangements of the house. How blind I have been! So far as I can reconstruct the matter, this is what happened. Joseph Harrison entered the building by the Charles Street door, and, since he knew where your office lay, went straight to your room. His arrival happened to coincide exactly with the moment at which you had left it. Seeing no one there, he rang the bell at once, and at that instant his eye fell upon the papers lying upon the table. In a single glance, he understood that what lay before him was an official document of the utmost importance. He seized it, thrust it into his pocket, and left the building immediately. You will remember that it took the commissionaire, in his sleepy confusion, 1 or 2 minutes to direct your attention to the bell. That interval was sufficient for the thief to escape. He took the earliest train to Woking. Upon examining his spoil, he became convinced of its great value and hid the treaty in what he believed to be a safe place, intending to recover it a day or 2 later. His purpose was to sell it to the French embassy or to any quarter where a high price might be offered. But when you were suddenly brought home, and Joseph had to vacate his room in haste, he found himself unable to reach his treasure, for there were by then at least 2 guardians watching over it day and night. His inability to recover the thing must have been maddening to him. At last, however, when he thought he had found the opportunity for which he had waited, he stole into your room to recover the treaty, but your awakening upset the whole of his plan. As you will remember, there was no nurse beside you that night, as there usually had been. I remember. I imagine that he regarded your being left alone that night as a magnificent opportunity. I never doubted that he would act again the instant the chance offered. Your leaving the room gave him precisely the opening that he wanted. By keeping Mrs. Harrison in the room all day, I prevented Joseph from moving before we did. I made him believe that the conditions were favorable, and then, as I have told you, I lay in wait. I was already certain that the papers were in the room, but I had no intention of breaking up all the boards and skirtings in order to find them. By allowing Joseph to fetch them out while I remained concealed, I spare myself the labor. Is there any point which you wish me to explain further? But why, at the first attempt, did he try to enter through the window? Asked Phelps. He could have come in through the door if he had wished. To reach your door, he would have had to pass 7 bedrooms, whereas it was a very simple matter to go outside. Have you any other question? You do not think that he meant murder, do you? Asked Phelps. He was using the knife merely as a tool. Holmes shrugged his shoulders. That may be so, said he. But upon that point all that I can say is that Mr. Joseph Harrison is not a man who has been greatly endowed with mercy.